Hi, my name's Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos that I'm doing on missions in games. And in this particular one, I'm going to talk about how missions fit together. We're going to be looking over the structure of a whole game, thinking about how you move the player from one mission to another. You'll see what I mean as I go along. And we're going to look at some different choices that are available to the game designer in this thing for structuring missions. So one principle that I try to stick by or try to encourage in games design is that the games designers need to be clear about what's going on in their game and the structure of what's happening in their game design. Because if the game designer isn't clear, then the player will be confused over whatever it is. Even if the game designer is clear, then the player is potentially confused anyway, because players are like that. So let's kick into some of these structures here. So the first one is to present the player with all the available missions in the game all at once. Here's a diagram of what that might look like. It's not a particularly helpful diagram. It's also not a particularly helpful structure because if you give all the missions to the player at the start, then there's no kind of sense of progress, and the player will not know which one to have a go at to start off with. So this is fairly unusual. It's kind of, I guess, the ultimate sandbox. Possibly not to be recommended. So let's move on to number two. So number two is linear. You probably know what the word means. It means in a line. And when this comes to missions, then this means one, then another, and then another. The diagram looks like this. We've got the missions set up in a line with arrows between them. You finish one mission and then you start the next. And this is a structure which lends itself really well to storytelling. There's a game that's kind of plays on this trope called Linear Quest, and a lot of games do it, and it might not necessarily be the worst thing in the world. There are reasons to think that there might be better things that you can do with quests, because you really want to give the player choices. However, having said that, then if you have a good level of choice in other parts of the game, so tactical choice in combat, for example, is particularly important, then you may well get away with having a linear quest structure, a mission structure for your game. And as I did say, it very strongly supports story-based games that are often very linear in the way they approach missions. There are, however, other approaches. So let's go to number three, which is branching, where you can choose your path. Here's the diagram for that. It's fairly easy to understand, hopefully. After the second mission here, then there's a choice, and you go to either the mission at the top or the mission at the bottom, and you keep following on a sort of linear thing, but you've had some choice at some point. There's only one particular choice, but it allows you to choose your path. There are good things about this, and there are bad things about this. The good thing is that you get choice, and you potentially have different endings to your game, which mean that you get the player having the feeling that their choices have made a significant impact on the progress of the game and how it happens. Some of the disadvantages are in terms of the assets and the amount of material that you've got to create for your game. The more you branch, the larger that need for assets becomes. And potentially the player doesn't necessarily get the benefit of all of them because they're only choosing one of the paths that you've had to provide for them. There is a second approach to this thought of branching, which is sometimes called pearl drop. And this is to have a chain of choices or chain of missions that branches but then comes back together. So it's choose your path again. Here's the diagram. So we're starting out at the left-hand end. We've got some quests. We're in a line. We choose one path, but then the paths converge again. They come back together. And so it kind of gives that feeling of the choice, but you don't necessarily have the bloat so much of assets as you do in other situations. And another issue is with this potentially is that it gives the illusion of choice. And if the players find out that actually their choices are not having the impact that you'd have in a proper branching structure, then sometimes they can feel a little bit disenfranchised by that. Okay, so strands. You could have a linear structure, but instead of one quest at once, you've got several going. So you've still got some choice going. Let's have a diagram. So here I've got 4 strands, purely linear strands of missions, but at any one point in time, there are 4 missions that the player can choose from that they can have a go at. And this is a way potentially of keeping keeping your assets under control, making it so the players get to see pretty much everything that you create, probably depending on what you're doing at the end of these strands, and but also giving them some choice as they progress. If they get sick of one mission, they can go and work on another strand for a while. And this is a relatively common thing to do in some situations. So you've got choice, but it's still linear. And another way of approaching strands is to think about the branching. So let's go back and have a look at the branching diagram. Rather than have it so that you are choosing one of the 2 missions when you make a choice, you can make this a situation where it branches out and is and so you've got 2 strands going on, and you can choose which missions that you do. It's not the same in the sense that it's not a major choice in terms of affecting the outcome of the story, but it does expand out the number of missions that a player can choose at any point in time. And another way of approaching this is Pearl Drop again. So let's have a look at the Pearl Drop diagram and how that applies in this situation. So if we've got some linear quests, and then we've got this and branching, which means that both strands become available. We've then got a question at the other end of what does it mean when they come together? And there are 2 choices here. So the first choice is maybe you need the player to complete both the upper strand and the lower strand before they can carry on the bit on the right hand side. But the other option is or, so they can take one route or the other route, and as long as they complete one of the upper and lower strands, they're then able to carry on with the missions, which is kind of similar to the normal kind of pill drop choice, which is where you go one way or the other way. But it does mean that there are some other missions available whilst you're in that pill drop. So it applies to pill drop too. There we go. Number 6, this is the last choice, which is to mix it up. And actually, this is what a lot of games really do, which is they take these ideas of branching, of pill drop, of openness, of parallelness, and of linearity, and they make their own structure up as for whatever suits the game and serves it. So it's a normal way of approaching things. However, there are complexities with this, so once again, I'm going to emphasize the idea that it's really helpful as a game designer to be clear about what your structure is, especially if you're in the situation where there are other people who are going to be involved in making your game. This is information that's really, really important, is the structure of how the missions flow from one to another. So really, we've been talking about main missions, which you can define as the missions that make up the main story that you need to get through. And when you finish those missions, you finish the game. Of course, there is the other subject, which is side missions. I'm just going to briefly mention those in this situation as well. So side missions tend to add more choice and variety for the player during the game. They tend to not be necessary to be completed in order to get the progress in the main game going forwards. But that can be a useful way of spicing up the game. And different games obviously approach these in different ways. There maybe should be more that I could talk about this. They tend to be more open in structure, so they're more likely to be one-offs or to be short linear strands, or to have some simple branching going on. There tends to be more of them available any one time. Then maybe in your main missions, because it is about kind of peppering in these little bits of flavour for the player to encounter. So that is it from me for now.